Ethan's legs burned as he ran, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The graveyard blurred around him, tombstones rising like jagged teeth from the earth. The shadows behind him swirled, twisting into unnatural shapes, reaching for him with elongated fingers. Beside him, Olivia's grip on his wrist tightened. Her face was pale, her expression unreadable, but there was urgency in her movements. "We need to get out of here," Ethan gasped. "We can't," Olivia said, barely audible over the howling wind. "Not yet." Ahead, the path forked, one leading toward the fog-choked village, the other disappearing into a thicket of gnarled trees. "The woods," Olivia said, pulling him toward the darker path. Ethan hesitated. The village was hell, but something about the forest felt worse, older, hungrier. "Trust me," Olivia insisted. "It's the only way." Behind them, the ground split apart, skeletal hands clawing from the soil, pulling themselves free. Their empty sockets locked onto Ethan. He didn't think. He ran. The moment they entered the forest, the air changed. The wind died, replaced by a suffocating stillness. The trees loomed unnaturally tall, their trunks twisted, their bark peeling like dead skin. The ground was uneven, soft, too soft, like stepping on something that had once been alive. Ethan could barely see beyond a few feet ahead. The branches curled together, blocking the moonlight, casting the forest into an endless dusk. And then the whispers began, faint at first like wind through dead leaves, but then they grew louder. "Ethan." He froze. The voice was familiar, too familiar. He turned his head slowly, his stomach twisting into knots. A figure stood between the trees. A girl barely older than 17. His sister, Rachel. Ethan's mouth went dry, his legs locked in place. Rachel had died 20 years ago. She had drowned. He had been there. He had seen her slip beneath the water, her outstretched hand just inches from his grasp. "Ethan," she whispered again, stepping closer. Her skin was pale, her hair clinging to her face as if still wet. Her lips trembled, her eyes full of sorrow. His chest tightened. "Rachel?" She smiled, and for a moment it was really her, his sister, alive, whole. Then her head twitched, her smile widened, too wide, stretching unnaturally across her face. Her eyes darkened, filling with an abyssal black. "You left me," she whispered. Ethan stumbled back. The trees around them groaned as if they were breathing. Olivia grabbed his arm. "It's not her, but she's not real, Ethan. Keep moving." Rachel stepped forward, her movements jerky, unnatural. "I was calling for you," she said, her voice breaking. "You could have saved me." Ethan's breath hitched. His body trembled. He had lived with that guilt his whole life. Rachel's head tilted at an unnatural angle. "Come closer, brother," she whispered, extending a hand. Her fingers were elongated, nails blackened. Her other hand twitched and twitched like a puppet controlled by unseen strings. Olivia yanked him back. "Close your eyes." Ethan shut them tight. The whispers grew into screams. The air around him pulsed. Then, silence. When he opened his eyes, Rachel was gone. The trees had shifted. The path ahead was clearer now, leading deeper into the forest. "Keep going," Olivia whispered. They walked for what felt like hours, the forest stretching endlessly. Time lost meaning. The deeper they went, the more Ethan felt like he was walking in circles. Then the trees thinned. They stepped into a clearing. A house stood in the center, ancient and crumbling. The wood was blackened with age, the windows shattered, but there was something familiar about it. Ethan's stomach churned. "I know this place." Olivia didn't respond. A chill ran through him. "I lived here." The memory hit him like a crashing wave. He had been young, maybe 5 or 6. His family had lived in Ravenshade before moving away, but this house, this exact house, was where he had spent his early childhood. How had he forgotten? A movement in the window caught his eye. A shadow, shifting behind the glass. Someone was inside. Without thinking, he stepped forward. The door creaked open before he even touched it. The air inside was thick with dust and something worse, the scent of rot. The house was silent, too silent. Then a sound, a soft, rhythmic tapping. Ethan's blood ran cold. He knew that sound. It was the sound of someone tapping their fingernails against the wood, a habit his mother had when she was anxious. Slowly, he turned the corner into the living room. A woman sat in the old rocking chair by the window, her back turned to him. Her thin fingers tapped against the armrest, over and over. Tap, tap, tap. Ethan's throat went dry. His mother had died in this house. He took a slow step forward. "Mom?" The tapping stopped. The chair creaked as she turned. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Her face, decomposed, hollowed out sockets where her eyes should be. Her mouth was sewn shut with thick black thread, and yet she was smiling. The air grew heavy. Ethan's vision blurred, the walls around him twisted, shifting into something unnatural. Then his mother's sewn lips parted, and in a voice that was not hers, she whispered, "Welcome home."